Welcome back to the Uncanny Valley podcast, where we take the sources you share with us, the articles, the research, the notes, and embark on a deep dive to extract the most important insights.
We're here to be your guides. Yeah, cutting through the volume of information to help you get well-informed quickly, uncovering those surprising facts and aha moments hidden within the material.
Exactly. Think of it as a shortcut to understanding what's truly significant in the documents you've compiled. Today, we have a stack of material focusing on a perennial favorite from the world of literature.
hmm
But we're not just recounting the story, we're using these sources to explore specific observations, analyses, and moments highlighted within the text itself.
Right. This collection of sources zeroes in on the characters, the evolution of relationships, and, the intricate social dynamics at play in this fictional world.
Uh-huh.
Our mission is to unpack the perspectives presented here, to understand why these specific points are called out, and to see what enduring insights they offer us.
So let's open up this trove of observations and insights and see what stands out. Let's begin our deep dive. Right away, the source material we have makes a very clear, very strong argument about the fundamental strength of this novel. It doesn't focus so much on the plot complexity,
No, not at all.
but rather emphasizes its excellence in depicting a pathetic or humorous character and possessing consummate command of dialogue.
Yes. The source is quite adamant about this. It even singles out dialogue as perhaps the rarest of all faculties. That immediately tells us where the source sees the novel's genius residing, not in some perfectly engineered storyline,
Right.
but in the living, breathing quality of its people and the way they interact through speech. Yeah.
And the contrast it draws is really sharp. The source explicitly states that a novel excelling in these areas, character and dialogue, is infinitely better than one with a faultless plot acted and told by puppets with pebbles in their mouths.
Wow. Yeah.
What a vivid, almost brutal image. It completely devalues mechanical plotting in favor of authentic human portrayal, however flawed it might be.
That imagery is powerful, isn't it?
Yeah.
It suggests that a technically perfect plot means, well, pretty much nothing if the characters feel lifeless or their conversations just feel stiff and unnatural.
Yeah.
The source values the messy, sometimes ridiculous, but ultimately believable interactions that reveal true human nature. It's prioritizing genuine representation over structural perfection.
And the source reinforces this by saying the novel would be far lower in quality if it didn't contain what it calls the very masterpieces of Miss Austen's humor and of her faculty of character creation. It's putting character and humor right at the absolute core of the novel's enduring appeal and artistic merit.
It leaves no doubt, really. The source asserts that the brilliance isn't just in having interesting characters, but in crafting them with such mastery and in infusing the narrative with humor that springs from these characters and situations. These are the essential ingredients, according to our source.
Okay, with that foundation laid about the novel's core strengths, let's start meeting some of these characters the source introduces early on. Characters highlighted as prime examples of this mastery. First up, a figure who provides endless opportunities for pathetic or humorous character, Mr. Collins.
Yes. Mr. Collins. The source immediately zeroes in on him, noting how his greatness is satisfactorily exhibited. Now, that phrase itself carries a certain irony, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
When you consider the description that follows.
Completely, because the source then immediately states that his character is incapable of being reconciled with reality, but then paradoxically adds that many of his words and actions might be historically true.
Right. That contradiction is fascinating. How can someone feel utterly unrealistic, almost like a caricature, yet somehow be grounded in historical truth?
It's strange.
Speaks to the source's insight into Austen's method, I think. Collins feels almost like an alien dropped into the world, his obsequiousness, his bizarre pronouncements, his utter lack of social grace despite constantly striving for it. He's exaggerated for effect.
Totally.
Yet the source is arguing that the component parts of his absurdity, the specific types of flattery, the narrow-mindedness, the fixation on status and patronage, those things were indeed reflective of actual social types or behaviors common in that era.
So while the whole package in one person might feel over the top,
Yeah.
the individual elements resonate with historical possibility. He's an assemblage of real-life absurdities, just amplified. The source doesn't pull any punches either, quoting the assessment that he is not a sensible man and the deficiency of nature had been but little assisted by education or society.
Oof. That blunt statement, highlighted by the source, provides the fundamental reason for his behavior. It's not just a lack of social polish. It's a fundamental intellectual and social deficiency that hasn't been corrected by his upbringing or interactions.
Hmm.
This explains his awkwardness, his self-importance, and his relentless, almost mechanical focus on his patroness, Lady Catherine de Bourgh, which becomes, central to his identity in the narrative.
Moving on to the matriarch of the central family, Mrs. Bennet. The source describes her portrayal as either exquisitely amusing or more horribly true. That duality, again, finding humor in something that also feels uncomfortably real.
It captures her perfectly, doesn't it? Her anxieties are a defining feature, particularly her famous nerves. The source draws attention to her dialogue with Mr. Bennet as a key illustration.
Oh, yeah.
She complains, "Mr. Bennet, how can you abuse your own children in such a way? You take delight in vexing me. You have no compassion on my poor nerves."
And his dry, sardonic reply, also quoted by the source, "You mistake me, my dear. I have a high respect for your nerves. They are my old friends. I have heard you mention them with consideration these 20 years at least."
Oh, yeah. That exchange, highlighted by the source, brilliantly encapsulates their relationship dynamic, her constant performance of distress, and his detached, witty amusement at her expense.
It's quite something.
Beyond her nerves, though, her primary, and perhaps more understandable, anxiety stems from the entail on their estate. The source quotes her genuine distress about this. "It is a grievous affair to my poor girls," and her almost bewildered frustration. Why should he have it more than anybody else? This highlights the real financial vulnerability faced by women in that period due to inheritance laws.
Right.
Her worries are genuine, even if her constant fretting and social climbing efforts are often ridiculous.
Her hopes, therefore, are fixed entirely on securing wealthy husbands for her daughters, which the source notes as she expresses her desire to see many young men of 4,000 a year come into the neighborhood.
Yeah, that's the goal.
This isn't just about comfort, it's about survival and security in a system that provides neither for her daughters otherwise.
It grounds her often absurd behavior in a very real societal constraint. Her anxieties, however hysterically expressed, are born of a precarious reality for her family.
Counterbalancing Mrs. Bennet's agitation is her husband, Mr. Bennet. The source emphasizes how his character is revealed primarily through his dialogue, showcasing his wit, his intelligence, and almost cynical detachment from the chaos around him.
His lines, as quoted by the source, are often the most memorable and sharp. When accused of vexing his wife, he responds, "You take delight in vexing me," turning her own words back on her.
He does.
His summary of his domestic situation is stark in its brevity. He lived with his wife.
Ouch.
And his response to his wife's distress about the entail is classic dry wit. "Let us be thankful that you were preserved from a state of such insensibility."
His view of social life is perhaps best captured in the line the source highlights, "For what do we live, but to make sport for our neighbors and laugh at them in our turn?"
Yeah. It's a deeply cynical, almost offensive posture, using humor and detachment as a shield against his frustrating reality.
However, the source also offers a crucial critical perspective on Mr. Bennet, noting the commentary on his ill-judged direction of talents, leading to his inability to preserve the respectability of his daughters.
That's important.
While his wit is entertaining, the source suggests it's a coping mechanism that masks a fundamental neglect of his paternal duties. He hasn't provided the guidance or stability needed,
Right.
contributing significantly to the very problems that cause his wife so much anxiety and, ultimately, leads to crisis. His detachment comes at a high price for his family.
Definitely. So now, let's look at the arrival of the two key male figures who set the main plot in motion. Their contrasting first impressions are central, according to the source, Mr. Bingley and Mr. Darcy. Their appearance at the Meryton Assembly is a pivotal moment.
It really is. Bingley, the source tells us, makes an immediately positive impression. He was sure of being liked wherever he appeared, described simply as friendly and obliging. He just radiates ease and geniality.
And Mrs. Bennet's reaction, highlighted by the source, confirms this universal approval, her immediate excitement and hope for him to marry Jane. He's the ideal catch, socially acceptable and agreeable.
Absolutely.
Darcy, in stark contrast, arrives described as reserved and fastidious, and his manners, though well-bred, were not inviting. The source notes the direct opposition to Bingley. While Bingley was sure of being liked, Darcy was continually giving offense.
And the source pinpoints the exact moment that solidifies this negative first impression for the central character, Elizabeth. It's his infamous overheard remark about her. "She's tolerable, but not handsome enough to tempt me.
Ouch. Yeah. That line, as presented in the source, is the perfect encapsulation of his perceived arrogance and pride. It's a brutal, casual dismissal that showcases his social snobbery and his own excessive pride. It sets the stage for Elizabeth's strong dislike.
And Elizabeth's reaction to this insult is vital, according to the source. She doesn't quietly stew, she processes it and weaponizes it with wit. The source notes she told the story with great spirit among her friends, finding him so disagreeable a man that it would be quite a misfortune to be liked by him.
Ah, yeah, she turns his disdain into a source of amusement and a justification for her own prejudice against him.
This initial clash, driven by Darcy's pride and Elizabeth's wounded pride, which, manifests as prejudice, is the fundamental dynamic established by the source material right at the very beginning of their interaction.
Okay, so adding another layer of complexity to these early impressions is the arrival of Mr. Wickham, who makes an entirely different kind of favorable impression.
Oh, yes, Wickham. The source points to his amiable appearance as the key factor. He has charm, he seems outwardly agreeable, immediately captivating those around him, including Elizabeth.
And he quickly leverages this charm to tell a story designed to gain sympathy and paint Darcy in a terrible light. He claims Darcy unjustly deprived him of a promised living from Darcy's late father.
Right.
The source highlights Elizabeth's immediate and strong reaction to this tale. She thought Mr. Darcy so bad as this, attributing to him malicious revenge, such injustice, such inhumanity.
Her willingness to believe this, the source notes, is striking, particularly because she confesses she had never liked him. Darcy, anyway.
Yeah, that's key. Her existing negative bias against Darcy, fueled by his earlier insult, makes her predisposed to accept Wickham's version of events without question. It's a classic example of confirmation bias playing out in her judgment.
These early interactions, Mr. Collins's absurdity, Mrs. Bennet's anxieties, Mr. Bennet's detached wit, Bingley's easy charm, Darcy's off-putting pride, Elizabeth's quick judgments, and Wickham's deceptive amiability are all laid out in the source as the critical foundation. They establish the characters and the initial misjudgments that will drive much of the narrative tension and transformation.
As the source shows, first impressions, often incomplete or distorted by our own biases, are central to the unfolding drama. These early character sketches and interactions contain the seeds of the conflicts and revelations to come.
Our source material then shifts to section 2, taking us deeper into how these characters and their initial judgments develop within relationships, highlighting moments of misperception and the influence of social dynamics. A key event detailed by the source is Jane's illness while visiting the Bingley sisters at Netherfield.
Ah, yes.
And Elizabeth's decision to walk there to attend to her.
Elizabeth's walk is presented as a deliberate and slightly unconventional act. She arrives, as the source describes, having walked 3 miles, with weary ankles, dirty stockings, and a face glowing from the exertion.
Not exactly the height of fashion for the time.
No, and this physical description is important. It signifies her genuine concern for her sister and her willingness to disregard minor social proprieties for a greater purpose.
And this practical, slightly disheveled arrival immediately highlights the superficiality of the Bingley sisters, Miss Bingley and Mrs. Hurst. They express surprise and even contempt, finding it almost incredible that she would walk alone in dirty weather.
It shows their disdain for anything that deviates from their refined artificial standards of female behavior. They view it as a lack of breeding, basically.
While Bingley, in contrast, reacts with his usual good humor and kindness, just happy to see Elizabeth, Mr. Darcy's reaction, however, is singled out by the source as particularly revealing.
Yes, it is. He is described as being divided between admiration of the brilliancy which exercise had given to her complexion and doubt as to the occasions justifying her coming so far alone.
That specific observation from the source is crucial. It shows his internal conflict in that moment. He is physically drawn to her vitality and the natural beauty enhanced by her walk, the admiration part. But the doubt reveals his ingrained social conditioning, his struggle to reconcile his attraction with what he perceives as a breach of propriety. He's torn between his developing feelings and his deep-seated awareness of social rules and, well, her lower social standing.
It's a fascinating glimpse into his internal battle, noted by the source. Meanwhile, Miss Bingley's initial politeness towards Elizabeth quickly cools into cold civility regarding Jane's prolonged stay. The source shows her growing impatient and resentful, her actions driven by a desire to discourage Bingley's attachment to Jane and promote her own interest in Darcy.
The source then draws attention to the accomplished woman conversation that takes place at Netherfield, another pivotal exchange between Elizabeth and Darcy.
Ah, yes, the list. Miss Bingley and Darcy lay out a lengthy and demanding list of requirements for an accomplished woman. According to the source, it includes a thorough knowledge of music, singing, drawing, dancing, and the modern languages, plus a certain air and manner of walking, posturing, and speaking.
It's an exhaustive list reflecting the superficial expectations placed on women in their circle, focused purely on ornamental skills, like being a decorative object.
Pretty much. And Darcy adds his own requirement, something more substantial, emphasizing improvement of the mind by extensive reading. This addition is significant.
It is. It immediately sets him apart from the purely superficial expectations of Miss Bingley. He values intellectual depth.
And this is where Elizabeth, as the source highlights, injects her characteristic wit, pointing out the near impossibility of meeting such a comprehensive standard and implying that even those who possess these skills might lack genuine substance.
Their exchange here, where Elizabeth is willing to challenge the premise and Darcy responds by adding intellectual merit, is identified by the source as a key moment where their mutual interest develops. Despite their initial antagonism, they find each other's minds engaging and enjoy the intellectual sparring. The source suggests this meeting of minds is what begins to bridge the gap created by their initial Pride and Prejudice.
The Netherfield Ball is another event the source details as having significant repercussions, bringing several dynamics to the surface.
One notable absence is Mr. Wickham, which the source points out. Lydia is eager to see him. The explanation given is business in town, but Mr. Denny's significant smile, as noted by the source, hints at another reason.
Right, we understand later from the source that Darcy's influence prevented Wickham from attending, preventing an awkward or potentially damaging encounter. Smart move, actually.
Elizabeth ends up dancing with Darcy, a moment charged with the tension of their past interactions. The source described their conversation. Darcy asks her to dance a second time,
Which she refuses.
She does refuse, and the source notes her refusal is delivered with a mixture of sweetness and archness, suggesting she is not merely being contrary, but injecting her refusal with a certain charm that intrigues him.
Their discussion turns to Wickham, a dangerous topic given their differing knowledge. Darcy refuses to engage directly, stating curtly that reports about him may vary greatly.
Yeah, very tight-lipped.
When Elizabeth attempts to probe further, trying to sketch his character based on Wickham's allegations, Darcy's reply is cold. I would by no means suspend any player of yours by defending himself. It shows his continued pride and unwillingness to address gossip, even when prompted by Elizabeth.
However, the source provides crucial insight into Darcy's internal state beneath this seemingly cold exterior. It notes Elizabeth's surprise, or amazement at his gallantry, that he wasn't offended by her refusing his second request for a dance.
And even more revealingly, the source states that Darcy had never been so bewitched by any woman as he was by her.
This is a significant moment highlighted by the source. Despite her inferiority of her connections, Darcy is clearly falling for her. The source suggests he was in some danger of being completely captivated.
The intellectual sparring, her lively wit, her refusal to be intimidated, these qualities are attracting him powerfully, even as his social judgment is tested. It shows the attraction is strong, simmering beneath their surface conflict.
Following the ball, Bingley's sudden departure for London has a devastating effect on Jane and fuels Elizabeth's suspicions, as detailed by the source.
Yeah, this is a blow. The news arrives via a letter from Miss Bingley to Jane, stating they are all settled in London for the winter. The letter attempts to dampen Jane's hopes, mentioning Bingley's supposed lack of hurry to return and hinting strongly at his partiality for Miss Darcy.
Ugh, Miss Bingley.
Positioning her as a potential match. It's quite calculated.
Jane's reaction, according to the source, is one of distress and heartbreak. Yet her incredibly charitable nature prevents her from seeing ill intent. She believes Caroline is incapable of willfully deceiving anyone and must herself be deceived about Bingley's feeling or intentions.
Bless her heart. She clings to hope, unwilling to attribute malice.
Elizabeth, in contrast, reacts with silent indignation. The source describes her heart as divided between concern for her sister and resentment against all others she suspects are involved.
And she knows who to blame.
She immediately targets the influence of Bingley's two unfeeling sisters and of his overpowering friend, meaning Darcy. She fears that the attractions of Miss Darcy and the amusements of London will be enough to extinguish Bingley's attachment to Jane, especially given his amiable, perhaps easily swayed nature.
She dismisses Caroline's assertion about Bingley's partiality for Miss Darcy as clearly manipulative and without basis in reality. The source recounts her conversation with Jane, where she voices these suspicions about external influence.
Which Jane just can't accept.
No, in her innocence, she simply cannot accept it.
Elizabeth, based on her observations and suspicions highlighted by the source, concludes that Bingley's lack of resolution and want of attention to other people's feelings made him vulnerable, and his friend Darcy's influence was the final push.
This event, as the source emphasizes, starkly demonstrates themes of manipulation, the cost of naivety like James, and the consequences of allowing others to dictate one's heart, setting up a major conflict for Elizabeth regarding Darcy.
Section 3 of our deep dive, guided by the source material, brings us into the realm of social climbing, duty, and some truly unexpected matches, centering first on the indefatigable Mr. Collins and his quest for a wife.
Ah, the quest. The source vividly describes his confidence and sense of entitlement in this pursuit. He arrives at Longbourn fully intending to choose a wife from among the Bennet daughters.
Like picking fruit off a tree.
Pretty much. Viewing it as a noble way to make amends for the injustice of inheriting their estate over them.
And his motivation is explicitly tied to duty, and more specifically, the instructions of his formidable patroness. The source quotes Lady Catherine de Bourgh's directive, "Mr. Collins, you must marry.
You must marry.
Choose properly, choose a gentlewoman for my sake and for your own. Let her be an active, useful sort of person, not brought up high, but able to make a small income go a good way."
It's so transactional. This isn't about love or even compatibility. It's about fulfilling a social obligation and finding a practical partner suitable for his position as a clergyman connected to a great estate.
Collins internalizes this completely. He initially sets his sights on Jane, then pivots to Elizabeth. He believes, as the source points out, that Elizabeth's lively wit, which he finds acceptable in a peculiar way, would be acceptable to her Lady Catherine, especially when tempered with the silence and respect he assumes Elizabeth will show his patroness.
Which is just a bizarre interpretation of wit in Elizabeth.
Completely misses the point. His proposal to Elizabeth, as detailed in the source, is a masterclass in awkwardness and self-absorption. He presents his reasons for marrying in 3 parts, focusing on his duty to Lady Catherine, his duty as a clergyman, and his desire for domestic comfort.
And notably absent is any mention of Elizabeth's feelings.
0. He completely dismisses Elizabeth's clear refusals, assuming it's just the usual female behavior designed to increase his ardor, expecting her to accept after a second or even a third time.
His total inability to comprehend her genuine lack of interest is highlighted by the source. When she finally makes her refusal unequivocally clear, his reaction is telling. He speaks of resignation to inevitable evils, and even doubts his positive happiness anyway.
Wow.
Revealing that his pursuit was never about her happiness or even his own emotional fulfillment, but about checking off a box.
Predictably, Mrs. Bennet's reaction to Elizabeth's refusal is extreme. The source describes her as being ragged at her and insisting upon her marrying him, completely focused on the perceived security of the match and heedless of Elizabeth's feelings.
Yeah, she hits the roof. This leads to one of Mr. Bennet's most famous lines, quoted by the source, where he steps in with his characteristic dry wit to defend Elizabeth.
The ultimatum.
Yes.
Yes.
An unhappy alternative is before you. From this day, you must be a stranger to one of your parents. Your mother will never see you again if you do not marry Mr. Collins, and I will never see you again if you do.
It's a moment of genuine paternal support, albeit delivered with typical detachment, starkly illustrating the dysfunctional dynamic and the pressure Elizabeth is under.
Following this dramatic proposal and refusal, the source presents Charlotte Lucas's surprising engagement to Mr. Collins.
Which floors Elizabeth.
Understandably. This decision is explained by the source with stark pragmatism. Charlotte is not marrying for love, but for a comfortable home and security. The source later reiterates this, calling it a very good match for her in a prudential light.
It's a calculated choice based on the limited opportunities available to women of her age and social standing who lack fortune. Security trumps romance.
Elizabeth's reaction to this news, as described in the source, is one of astonishment and concern. She finds it almost as far from possibility that Charlotte, her intelligent and sensible friend, would encourage such a man.
Right.
The source notes her struggle to offer congratulations with tolerable firmness. It challenges Elizabeth's romantic idealism and forces her to confront the harsher realities faced by women without financial means.
Though later, her reflection that Charlotte might actually be happy in her way shows a dawning pragmatic acceptance of Charlotte's perspective.
Exactly. It highlights the societal pressures that made Charlotte's choice not only understandable, but from her point of view, entirely rational. She is sacrificing the idea of romantic love for the tangible reality of a secure home and social position, a choice that the source presents without judgment, but which Elizabeth initially struggles to reconcile with her own values.
This section then introduces Lady Catherine de Bourgh in person as Elizabeth visits Hunsford and Rosings. The source details Mr. Collins's almost comical pride in his patroness, mentioning his triumph and his constant efforts to display her grandeur and importance.
Oh, he's unbearable about it. Lady Catherine's character, as revealed through her interactions at Rosings described in the source, is domineering and dictatorial. The source states that nothing was beneath this great lady's attention which could furnish her with an occasion for dictating to others.
She has to run everything.
Everything. She must have an opinion and exert her will on every subject, no matter how trivial.
We see this in her intrusive questions directed at Elizabeth, particularly when she discovers the Bennet sisters were raised without a governess. Her views on education and upbringing are rigid, leading her to assume they must have been neglected.
Yeah, she just pries into every detail of their lives, demonstrating a complete lack of boundaries. Her condescending interest extends even to the practical management of the Collinses' small household, questioning them about cows and poultry management.
As if she knows anything about it.
But right, it's not genuine interest, but an expression of her need to oversee and dictate even the most mundane aspects of their lives. The source also notes her conversations about her nephew, Mr. Darcy, speaking of his anticipated arrival with the greatest satisfaction, expressing the highest admiration for him, and seeming almost angry that Elizabeth and Miss Lucas had already met him.
This clearly establishes her proprietary attitude towards Darcy and foreshadows her belief that he is destined for her own daughter, setting her up as a formidable obstacle later in the narrative, as highlighted by the source.
These events, Collins's duty-driven marriage plot, Charlotte's pragmatic decision, and the introduction of the arrogant, controlling Lady Catherine underscore the intense social pressure surrounding marriage, the clash between romantic ideals and practical necessities, and the overbearing influence of the upper classes, all detailed effectively by the source material.
Section 4 marks a significant shift in perspective, largely driven by Elizabeth's visit to Pemberley, which leads her to fundamentally reevaluate Mr. Darcy, challenging her earlier prejudice.
Yes, the Pemberley visit is huge. Elizabeth travels with her uncle and aunt, the Gardiners. The source notes that the visit to Pemberley is unplanned, and Elizabeth is initially reluctant to go, agreeing only because she is assured Mr. Darcy is expected to be away.
Which says a lot about how strong her prejudice against him still is. She wants to avoid him entirely.
Exactly. The description of Pemberley itself, as seen through Elizabeth's eyes and detailed in the source, is crucial. She finds the rooms lofty and handsome, the furniture suitable to the fortune, but notes, with growing admiration for his taste, that it was neither gaudy nor uselessly fine, possessing more real elegance than the furniture of Rosings.
So it's impressive, but tasteful, reflecting the character beneath the exterior pride. The source shares Elizabeth's striking thought upon seeing it, and of this place, I might have been mistress. And her relief at her past refusal, underscoring how much she has yet to learn and how far she was from appreciating him at that time.
The estate serves as a metaphor for Darcy himself, substantial, well-ordered, and possessing a deeper elegance than the ostentatious display at Rosings under Lady Catherine.
A truly pivotal moment highlighted by the source is the introduction of the housekeeper, Mrs. Reynolds, and her utterly unexpected glowing praise of Mr. Darcy.
This is a game-changer for Elizabeth. Mrs. Reynolds has known Darcy since he was a child, and her description of him is a stark contradiction to Elizabeth's perception. She describes him as a kind, good master, stating she has never had a cross word from him in my life, having known him since he was 4 years old.
Incredible.
She uses terms like sweet-tempered, open, generous, artless, and amiable. These are not the words Elizabeth would ever have associated with the proud, reserved man she knew.
Not at all. Elizabeth's reaction, according to the source, is one of increasing astonishment. She finds this praise most extraordinary, most opposite to her ideas. Her firmest opinion had been that he was not good-tempered.
This direct, sincere testimony from someone who has known him intimately his entire life, someone with no apparent motive to lie, forces Elizabeth to question the very foundation of her judgment of him.
Yeah.
This is presented by the source as a major turning point in the dismantling of her prejudice. It plants the first significant seed of doubt about everything she thought she knew about him.
Just as Elizabeth is beginning to process this new perspective, the unexpected meeting with Mr. Darcy himself occurs at Pemberley, a moment of significant awkwardness and revelation.
Talk about timing. The source describes Elizabeth's immediate reaction as embarrassment impossible to be overcome and confusion at seeing him in this unexpected context, in his own home, right after hearing such praise.
But what strikes her, and is emphasized by the source, is the remarkable alteration in Darcy's manner. He displays perfect civility, which Elizabeth notes is not merely civil, it was really attentive.
Yeah, a total shift. She sees none of his usual sedateness and is amazed at the alteration of his manner since they last parted. He is genuinely pleasant and makes civil inquiries after her family, showing a personal interest she hadn't seen before.
His interaction with the gardeners is also telling. The source notes his surprise at discovering their connection to Elizabeth, but he handles it with fortitude, turning back with them and entering into conversation. Elizabeth is pleased, and the source even says, triumphant, that he acknowledged her disgraceful companions, demonstrating a willingness to look past her lower connections that she hadn't seen from him before.
The source further highlights his obvious interest by noting his invitation for Mr. Gardner to fish, and his mentioning that Bingley, his sisters, and one other person, his beloved sister Georgiana, would be joining him the next day and wished to be known to Elizabeth.
That's a big deal.
It clearly signals his desire for her to meet the members of his intimate circle, implying a level of seriousness in his continued regard for her.
The meeting with Miss Darcy the following day further cements the change in Elizabeth's understanding, according to the source. Based on Wickham's malicious account, Elizabeth anticipates meeting a proud, reserved, disagreeable girl.
And what she finds is completely different. Her surprise is considerable upon meeting Miss Darcy and finding her to be exceedingly shy, not proud at all. The source describes her physically as tall and on a larger scale than Elizabeth, accomplished and possessing amiable manners.
This direct contradiction between Wickham's depiction and the reality of Miss Darcy, combined with Mrs. Reynolds's praise, forces Elizabeth to fully confront Wickham's deceit. The source later quotes Elizabeth reflecting on this, realizing, "He must know that she was as amiable and unpretending as we have found her."
Bang! Wickham's lie is exposed, and with it, his true character. Miss Bingley also appears, and her behavior, detailed in the source, further highlights her unpleasant nature and jealousy.
Oh, she can't help herself.
No, she attempts to discompose Elizabeth with pointed hints about Wickham, but fails to get Georgiana to join her in any criticism, showing Georgiana's good nature. Miss Bingley resorts to criticizing Elizabeth's appearance, calling her too thin, saying her complexion has no brilliancy, and that she has a sharp, shrewish look.
So petty.
Totally. This petty behavior serves only to make Elizabeth look better by comparison and reinforces Miss Bingley's superficiality. Georgiana's quiet favor towards Elizabeth is ensured by her brother's recommendation, showing Darcy's clear influence.
The Pemberley visit as a whole is presented by the source as a dramatic turning point. It allows Elizabeth to see Darcy in his own environment, hear unbiased testimony about his character, and directly witness his altered manner towards her.
This experience challenges her deepest prejudices and opens the door for a transformation in her feelings.
Section 5 brings a sharp turn with a crisis that truly tests the characters and reveals hidden truths, particularly concerning Wickham and Darcy. This is the shocking news of Lydia's elopement with Mr. Wickham.
Yeah, this is where things get really serious. The source describes the arrival of Jane's letters bearing the dreadful news. Most jarring is Lydia's own flippant note, quoted by the source.
Oh, that note.
Right. I am going to Gretna Green. I should never be happy without him, so think it no harm to be off. Sign my name, Lydia Wickham. What a good joke it will be.
A good joke. The sheer immaturity and lack of understanding of the potential ruin she is bringing upon her family is stunningly captured in this note.
It really is. The family's reaction, as detailed by the source, is one of immediate panic and devastation. Mrs. Bennet collapses in hysterics, crying, "My poor nerves!"
Of course.
Mr. Bennet is described as being, "Never in my life saw him so affected, his usual detachment broken by genuine distress. He expresses profound self-reproach, stating, 'I've been too remiss,' and admitting, 'I have done too little, nothing,' to guide his younger daughters."
Yeah, the consequences of his neglect.
Yeah, exactly. Particularly Lydia and Kitty, who he allowed to run wild. This is the consequence of his earlier ill-judged direction of talents.
Elizabeth immediately grasps the full extent of the disgrace and the potential ruin, not just for Lydia, but for all her sisters' prospects of making respectable marriages. She thinks every way horrible.
This source also notes Kitty's anger, not at Lydia's elopement, but at having been forced to conceal the attachment, again highlighting the superficiality of their concerns.
Unbelievable. Mr. Bennet travels to London to search, followed by Mr. Gardner, highlighting the desperate nature of the situation.
This crisis forces the full revelation of Mr. Wickham's true character, confirming the suspicions raised earlier at Pemberley.
The mask is off.
Completely.
Yeah.
The source states that once the news of the elopement breaks, all Meryton seems striving to blacken him, indicating that his true disreputable character was already well known to many, though Elizabeth chose to believe his lies. The source details the accusations against him. He was deeply in debt to every tradesman in the place, and his intrigues, all honored with the title of seduction, had been extended into every tradesman's family.
Just awful. This paints a picture of a dissipated, manipulative, and entirely mercenary individual, completely at odds with the charming facade he presented.
And the source provides the definitive account of Wickham's history through Darcy's letter, which Elizabeth reads later, but is presented to the reader here for clarity.
Right, the full story.
Darcy explains Wickham's background as the son of his father's steward, supported by the elder Darcy. He was offered a respectable living, but chose instead to take a lump sum of £3,000.
Which he just blew through.
Exactly. This sum, according to the source, was quickly squandered in a life of idleness and dissipation. Later, Wickham attempted to claim the living again and most heinously attempted to elope with the then 15-year-old Miss Darcy for a considerable fortune.
Unforgivably.
A plan thwarted by Darcy.
This complete picture of Wickham's character fundamentally changes Elizabeth's view, as noted by the source. His attentions to Miss King, previously seen through a slightly sympathetic lens, are now revealed as solely and hatefully mercenary.
His charming manner, once captivating, is now recognized as mere affectation, a sameness to disgust and weary. Her previous partiality for him is now seen for what it was, an ill success, a failure of judgment based on superficial appearances and her own prejudice against Darcy. Crucially, the source then reveals Mr. Darcy's decisive, though initially secret, role in resolving the crisis, an action that stands in stark contrast to his perceived character and Wickham's depravity.
The hidden hero emerges. Elizabeth learns from a letter from Mrs. Gardner, who was assisting in the search, that it was Mr. Darcy who actually found Lydia and Wickham in London and, through considerable effort, arranged their marriage.
It's quite something. The source details the effort involved. Darcy tracked them down. Lydia, foolishly still infatuated, refused to leave Wickham without marriage. Darcy then had to negotiate with Wickham.
Imagine that conversation.
Right, who, being entirely mercenary, wanted more than he could get, but at length was reduced to be reasonable. The source implies that reasonable meant Wickham was persuaded by a substantial financial incentive.
Bought off, basically.
Essentially. While Mrs. Gardner's letter refers to Mr. Gardner's involvement and refers to the costs in terms of how much money your uncle has laid down, the source makes it clear, and Elizabeth later fully understands, that it was Darcy who paid Wickham's extensive debts and provided for Lydia, securing the marriage and saving the family from utter ruin and disgrace.
And he did it quietly, without seeking recognition, fulfilling a sense of responsibility he felt due to Wickham's connection to him.
Exactly. The Bennet family's reaction to the news of the marriage being arranged is telling, as detailed by the source. Mrs. Bennet is immensely relieved and shifts instantly from despair to ecstatic joy,
Naturally.
focusing entirely on the supposed security of the marriage, celebrating Wickham's likely annual income, though inflated in her mind, as £10,000.
Oh, Mrs. Bennet. Mr. Bennet is surprised at how easily and cheaply the crisis seems to have been resolved, noting he will scarcely be £10 a year the loser. They initially attribute the financial settlement to Mr. Gardner's generosity.
This whole episode, the disgrace of the elopement, the exposure of Wickham, and the revelation of Darcy's hidden generosity and intervention profoundly alters Elizabeth's understanding of both men and their true characters, clearing away the layers of prejudice and paving the way for a transformation in her feelings towards Darcy.
Section 6 brings the narrative to its climax with crucial confrontations, confessions, and the path towards happy resolutions, beginning with the dramatic and uninvited arrival of Lady Catherine de Bourgh at Longbourn.
Oh, the showdown. The source explains that Lady Catherine has heard a rumor of a potential engagement between Elizabeth and Darcy, a report likely based on general expectation or perhaps gossip originating from someone like the Collinses. She's described as being exceedingly angry at the mere thought.
You can just picture it. Her entrance at Longbourn, as detailed by the source, is imperious. She arrives very stiffly, stating her blunt purpose immediately. She has come to inquire into a report and is not to be trifled with.
No messing around. She launches into a furious catalog of objections to the rumored match. Her arguments, quoted by the source, are entirely based on class prejudice and familial expectations. She calls the report of the engagement alarming. She objects to Elizabeth's low connections and the disgrace brought by Lydia's infamous elopement, asking with indignation, "Is such a girl to be my nephew's sister?" And most importantly, from her perspective, she states that Darcy is destined for his cousin, her own daughter, Miss de Bourgh.
She sees Elizabeth as an ambitious upstart trying to marry above her station.
Completely. Elizabeth's response, as described in the source, is remarkable for its calm but absolute firmness. She refuses to be intimidated or to promise Lady Catherine that she will refuse Darcy.
Good for her.
She directly counters Lady Catherine's arguments with logic and dignity. She asserts that she will not be dictated to in her marriage choices if there is no other valid objection, asking pointedly, if Mr. Darcy is neither by honor nor inclination confined to his cousin, why is not he to make another choice? And if I am that choice, why may not I accept him?
Boom. She completely dismisses Lady Catherine's threats of being censured, slighted, and despised by society for marrying outside her class, calling Lady Catherine's assumptions presumptuous.
The source highlights Elizabeth's powerful, defiant statement. She will not be dictated to by anybody.
Lady Catherine's reaction to this refusal to yield is furious. The source describes her taking no leave of the family upon her departure, declaring, "You deserve no such attention," and stating emphatically, "I am most seriously displeased."
A dramatic exit. But Elizabeth has held her ground completely.
And the source reveals the unexpected and positive consequence of Lady Catherine's high-handed intervention.
Yeah, it backfires spectacularly. Darcy learns of the report and is Anne's confrontation with Elizabeth. Seeing that Elizabeth, despite immense pressure from his formidable relative, steadfastly refused to promise that she would reject him, signals to Darcy that her feelings towards him must have changed.
Her defiance gives him hope.
Exactly. Lady Catherine, in her fury, unintentionally facilitates their union by revealing Elizabeth's altered sentiments.
This leads directly to the reconciliation and Darcy's second proposal. The source sets the scene with Elizabeth walking alone with Darcy after the rest of the party leaves them.
Elizabeth takes the courageous first step, breaking the ice by thanking him for his unexampled kindness to my poor sister during the elopement crisis, acknowledging that she is being a very selfish creature. Care not how much I may be wounding yours by bringing up the painful subject of Wickham.
That took guts.
It did. Darcy's response, quoted by the source, is immediate, heartfelt, and direct. You are too generous to trifle with me. If your feelings are still what they were last April, tell me so at once. My affections and wishes are unchanged, but one word from you will silence me on the subject forever.
Wow. He lays his heart bare, acknowledging her past rejection, but confirming his continued love and offering her the absolute power to end the matter.
And Elizabeth accepts, giving him to understand, as the source phrases it, that her sentiments had undergone so material a change.
The subsequent conversation between them, detailed extensively in the source, is where they clear up all past misunderstandings and reveal their respective journeys. Elizabeth explains how his letter, written after her first rejection, began to change her mind.
The famous letter.
Yes, stating how gradually all her former prejudices had been removed as she reread it and saw the truth in his explanations.
Darcy, in turn, explains his past conduct. He admits his error in interfering in Bingley and Jane's relationship, explaining he truly believed Jane was indifferent and was influenced by his sister's views.
Okay.
He provides the detailed account of his history with Wickham, confirming his father's generosity, Wickham's dissipation, the financial settlement, and the attempted elopement with Georgiana, which he had concealed out of shame for his family.
He also acknowledges that his scruples about Elizabeth's lower connections were natural and just from his social perspective at the time, but expresses regret for the proud and insulting manner of his first proposal.
And finally, he reveals that after Lady Catherine's visit gave him hope, he went to London and convinced Bingley that Jane's feelings were indeed real and deep, prompting Bingley's return to Netherfield and subsequent proposal to Jane.
So he fixed that too.
The reactions of the Bennet family to Elizabeth's engagement to Darcy are, as the source describes, perfectly characteristic and varied.
You can imagine. Mr. Bennet's initial reaction is one of profound astonishment exceedingly and disbelief. He makes wry comments referring to Darcy as the man who never looks at any woman but to see a blemish, and calls the situation admirable.
Elizabeth has to genuinely reassure him of her love. I do like him, I love him, describing him as perfectly amiable. before he gives his consent.
Once convinced of her happiness, he expresses high respect for Darcy, seeing him as a man to whom I should never dare refuse anything.
Mrs. Bennet's reaction, as detailed by the source, is a shift from brief shock to unadulterated, ecstatic joy, focused entirely on Darcy's immense wealth and social standing.
Figures.
The source quotes her exclamations, "Such a charming man,
They're
so handsome, so tall," focusing on the tangible benefits. "A house in town, everything that is charming," repeating the magic number 10,000 a year, and concluding with, "'Tis as good as a lord."
Oh, dear. The source notes Elizabeth's mortification at her mother's vulgar and mercenary reaction, which completely misses the emotional core of the engagement.
Completely. Jane is simply surprised at Elizabeth's change of heart towards Darcy, given her earlier strong dislike. Lady Catherine, predictably, remains extremely indignant on the marriage of her nephew.
No surprise there.
And the Collinses. The source notes that Charlotte is really rejoicing for Elizabeth, but they decide to leave Hunsford to avoid Lady Catherine's wrath and wait until the storm was blown over, highlighting the continued influence of their patroness.
Smart move by Charlotte again. These reactions, detailed in the source, serve to remind us of the persistent social hierarchies and values within the novel's world, even as the central couple has transcended their initial barriers of pride and prejudice to find happiness based on mutual understanding and genuine love.
As we wrap up this deep dive, let's reflect on the depths that the characters as presented in our source material, bringing us back to the initial commentary on the novel's greatest strength.
Yeah, the source's assertion that the novel's excellence lies in its pathetic or humorous character and consummate command of dialogue is really borne out by our exploration. We've seen how vividly drawn these figures are, how they feel real despite sometimes being exaggerated.
We've discussed the nuances, Mr. Bennet's wit masking his irresponsibility, Mrs. Bennet's folly layered with genuine maternal, if often misguided, concern, Jane's inherent sweetness and difficulty in seeing the worst in others.
Elizabeth's intelligence and quickness tempered by her initial misjudgments.
We've analyzed Darcy's journey from prideful isolation to revealed goodness and sense of duty, Wickham's charming facade crumbling to expose a truly depraved and mercenary core, and Lady Catherine's arrogance stemming entirely from her status and need for absolute control.
Right, and the source's comments about characters like Collins being incapable of being reconciled with reality, yet containing elements that might be historically true, or Mrs. Bennet being exquisitely amusing or more horribly true, capture this unique blend of caricature and painful accuracy that makes them feel so alive.
So what are the enduring lessons or insights we can take away from this deep dive into the source material's analysis of this classic novel?
Well, one of the most prominent insights highlighted is definitely the danger of judging people based solely on superficial appearances or incomplete first impressions. The stark contrast between Elizabeth's initial views of Darcy and Wickham and how those views were proven completely wrong is a central lesson from the source.
Absolutely. Another key takeaway is the destructive nature of pride and vanity. Darcy's social pride that isolates him, Miss Bingley's vanity that makes her cruel, Wickham's self-importance that drives his mercenary actions. The source implicitly shows how these flaws blind characters and create significant conflict.
The source also underscores the powerful impact of family dynamics and rigid societal expectations on individual choices and happiness, visible in the Bennet family struggles, Charlotte's pragmatic marriage, and Lady Catherine's attempts at control.
And the importance of seeking full information, questioning assumptions, and engaging in critical thinking rather than relying on gossip or partial accounts, like Elizabeth's initial trust in Wickham's narrative, is a clear path to understanding that Elizabeth follows, guided by the revelations highlighted by the source.
And finally, the source's analysis demonstrates the possibility of personal growth and transformation. Elizabeth overcomes her prejudice, Darcy sheds his excessive pride, and through this growth they become capable of a genuine and lasting connection.
These timeless character studies and insightful observations about social dynamics, as presented in our source material, continue to resonate deeply with us today.
Why do these characters and their struggles feel so familiar? I think because they grapple with universal aspects of the human condition, the complexities of relationships, the tension between individual desires and societal pressures, the struggle to see beyond our own biases, and the capacity for both folly and growth.
Yeah, these themes remain incredibly relevant as we navigate our own social landscapes. It encourages us, to look beyond surface appearances and to consider the multifaceted nature of people and the complex pressures they face, just as Elizabeth is forced to do.
And that wraps up our deep dive into these fascinating insights drawn from the source material about Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice.
We've explored how the strength of character and dialogue drives the narrative, how first impressions can be deceiving, and how overcoming our own flaws is essential for understanding both ourselves and others.
Here's a final thought for you to mull over until our next deep dive. How often do you find yourself making firm judgments about people based purely on their outward manner or the stories you hear about them, without consciously seeking out a deeper understanding or challenging those initial assumptions?
Something to consider. Thank you for joining us for this exploration.
Until next time, this has been the Uncanny Valley Podcast.